picture this. You're dating an absolutely gorgeous woman. She's confident, magnetic, and the kind of person every man in the room notices. You treat her like royalty, buying flowers, planning thoughtful dates, sending her sweet good morning texts. You're doing everything right, at least in the way society told you love should work, but instead of growing closer, something strange happens. She starts pulling away. The excitement in her voice fades. Her texts grow shorter, and slowly her desire to be around you disappears. And you're left wondering, what went wrong? Here's the uncomfortable truth. What I'm about to reveal may completely shatter everything you think you know about women and relationships. The uncomfortable truth that most men refuse to accept is this: for a woman to truly love you, desire you, and remain loyal to you, she must never feel entirely secure in your affection. She must feel like your attention is something worth striving for, something she earns rather than something that's given away without thought. And if you stick with me for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to reveal the exact psychology behind why women lose interest in men who treat them well, and more importantly, how you can transform this knowledge into a foundation for lasting, meaningful attraction. Now let's begin with the first hidden law of attraction. To understand why this happens, we must go back, far back, to the roots of human survival. For millions of years, women had to make one of the most difficult choices in nature: who to trust with their bodies, their safety, and their future offspring. In the ancient world, choosing poorly wasn't just about heartbreak. It could mean death. A woman who fell for a man who couldn't protect her during harsh winters, who had no ability to provide food or defend against rival tribes, risked her own survival and that of her children. This ancient necessity shaped the psychology of attraction. Women evolved to feel drawn toward men who displayed higher survival value: strength, resources, intelligence, or the ability to navigate social hierarchies. This evolutionary instinct is called hypergamy. It is the unconscious drive to seek partners who are perceived as stronger, more resourceful, or more capable than oneself. Even in the modern world of supermarkets and apartment complexes, this programming hasn't disappeared. It still runs quietly in the background of every romantic interaction. So when a man behaves in ways that signal neediness, desperation, or blind worship, her subconscious mind doesn't translate it as kindness. It registers it as weakness, and weakness in evolutionary terms is danger. This is why the so-called nice guy who showers a woman with gifts and attention often loses her attraction. Not because kindness is undesirable, but because kindness without strength and independence signals dependency. To her subconscious, it whispers, "This man cannot lead, cannot protect, cannot inspire." And without even realizing it, her mind begins to shut down the very circuits that generate desire. This is the first paradox men must understand. Love requires safety, but attraction requires challenge. A man who gives safety without challenge unknowingly suffocates the fire of desire. The illusion of security. When a man gives himself fully too soon, when he floods a woman with affection and attention before she has earned it, her mind begins to grow still. At first she feels flattered, even adored, but slowly the thrill disappears. The mystery fades. The chase dies. She is no longer stretching upward toward him. She has already captured him. And in that moment of complete certainty, her subconscious begins to wander. This isn't manipulation, it is psychology. Human beings are wired to value what is uncertain and to take for granted what is guaranteed. Think about the most expensive gemstones in the world. Their worth comes not just from beauty, but from rarity. If diamonds were scattered freely on the streets, no one would bend down to pick them up. Their value would vanish overnight. The same principle applies to relationships. When affection is too easily available, it loses its preciousness. Women do not consciously decide to devalue men who treat them well. They do not sit down and think, "He is too kind, I must leave him." Instead, their attraction system, shaped by biology, responds silently. Certainty signals safety, but it also signals predictability, and predictability over time kills desire. Desire thrives in uncertainty, in the tension between closeness and distance, in the dance of not fully knowing. This is why so many women find themselves drawn to men who seem less available, less desperate, less eager to please. These men may not even possess greater wealth, strength, or status. What they project, however, is self-sufficiency. They carry themselves as though they do not need validation, as though their world does not revolve around anyone's approval. This subtle distance forces a woman to lean in, to question, to wonder where she truly stands with him. And in that wondering, desire burns hotter. Psychologists call this phenomenon intermittent reinforcement, the same principle that keeps gamblers glued to slot machines. A reward that comes consistently is soon ignored, but a reward that comes unpredictably becomes irresistible. When a man's affection is given freely and constantly, it becomes predictable. But when it arrives at unexpected moments, when it must be earned, when it comes after effort, it creates psychological addiction. This is why the so-called nice guy often loses while the man with quiet confidence wins. The nice guy makes himself predictable. He responds instantly, agrees with everything she says, rearranges his life around her presence. His devotion, though sincere, becomes ordinary. The confident man, on the other hand, does not rush to answer every text. He is present but not desperate. His life has weight outside the relationship, and his attention feels scarce. That scarcity makes it valuable. The irony is that women still want kindness. They still long for loyalty, for warmth, for devotion. But they want these things from a man whose affection feels rare, not common. They want to earn it, to reach for it, to feel as though being chosen by him is a privilege. When a man gives this privilege away too cheaply, its value dissolves. And so the paradox stands. Security may build comfort, but it does not build passion. Passion is born in the tension between desire and doubt, certainty and uncertainty. It is the very illusion of insecurity that keeps love alive, the currency of value. To truly understand attraction, we must think of it in terms of value, not material value like money or possessions, but psychological value. Every interaction between two people is a silent negotiation of worth. Who is reaching? Who is being pursued? Who is setting the rhythm and who is following it? This invisible dance determines far more than most people realize. In modern dating culture, this is often explained through the concept of sexual market value. While the phrase sounds harsh, it reflects a reality that human beings, whether they admit it or not, are constantly evaluating one another's worth in the marketplace of desire. Beauty, confidence, intelligence, social status, even subtle body language. All of these become markers of value. But here is the truth that most men never learn. The perception of value is often more powerful than the reality of value. Consider two men. One is wealthy, well-educated, and socially respected. He drives an expensive car, wears tailored suits, and never struggles to pay the bills. The second man works a modest job, lives in a small apartment, and has little to show in terms of external success. Yet when you observe them in relationships, something surprising happens. The wealthy man gives and gives, lavish dinners, constant compliments, unconditional availability, and yet women grow bored of him quickly. The modest man, however, carries himself with independence. He teases, challenges, and never behaves as though her presence is the center of his existence. Strangely, it is this second man who often finds women chasing his attention, even though he offers far less materially. Why? Because value is not simply what you own. Value is how you carry yourself. The wealthy man may have external success, but his behavior signals neediness. His every action screams that her approval is his oxygen, and when approval becomes too easy to give, it loses meaning. The modest man, however, signals abundance. He may not own much, but he behaves like someone who could walk away at any moment. Someone who chooses her not out of desperation, but out of preference. His validation, when it arrives, feels like a gift rather than a guarantee. This is the currency of value, scarcity. Just as money loses its worth when printed endlessly, affection loses its worth when poured out without measure. Women, often without realizing it, are constantly attuned to these signals. They watch how quickly a man replies to their texts, how much of his time he surrenders, how easily his attention is captured. Each signal communicates whether his value is rooted in independence or in desperation. The paradox is cruel but undeniable. A man can possess every external marker of success, wealth, power, education, and still be dismissed if he treats his affection as limitless. Meanwhile, another man with little to his name can ignite obsession simply by making his attention feel rare. The female mind, wired by centuries of survival instincts, is drawn to what feels scarce and uncertain because scarcity suggests value. It is not that women despise kindness, nor that they seek cruelty. What they seek, often unknowingly, is a man whose kindness feels earned rather than automatic. The power of attraction lies not in endless giving, but in giving that feels deliberate, intentional, and precious. And once a man understands that his affection is currency, he begins to see why so many of his past relationships slipped away, and why those who mastered scarcity seem to hold endless power in love. The addiction of uncertainty. If there is one principle that explains why attraction often grows stronger in the presence of unpredictability, it is the principle of intermittent reinforcement. On the surface, this phrase might sound technical, but in reality it describes something you've experienced countless times in your own life. It is the same principle that keeps gamblers pouring coins into slot machines, that keeps us checking our phones for notifications, and that keeps certain relationships endlessly consuming our minds even when they should not. Human beings are wired to respond more intensely to rewards that are inconsistent. When a reward is given every single time, the mind grows accustomed to it and it quickly loses its power. But when a reward arrives unpredictably, the brain becomes hooked, endlessly chasing the next moment of gratification. Psychologists discovered this through experiments with animals. A rat given food every time it pressed a lever eventually lost interest in the lever. But a rat given food randomly without a predictable pattern became obsessed, pressing the lever again and again, unable to stop. Its brain had been hijacked by uncertainty. This same mechanism operates in relationships. When a man showers a woman with constant affection, replies instantly to her texts, and always makes himself available, she learns to expect his attention. His presence becomes predictable and therefore ordinary. But when his attention arrives with a touch of unpredictability, when he gives deeply in one moment but maintains his independence in another, her mind becomes preoccupied. She begins to wonder, does he like me as much as I think? Why didn't he respond immediately? What is he doing right now? These small doses of uncertainty cause her brain to release dopamine, the same neurotransmitter responsible for addiction. It is not cruelty. It is the way the human mind is designed. The unpredictability of affection mirrors the unpredictability of life itself. What is scarce and uncertain always captures more of our focus than what is guaranteed. This is why some women become addicted to men who give them little, because that little arrives wrapped in mystery and uncertainty which the mind mistakes for value. The hidden tests of desire. If there is one truth most men struggle to accept, it is this. Women test not because they are cruel, but because they are wired to. These small, subtle challenges, often called shit tests in crude language, are not games of malice, but games of survival. Throughout evolutionary history, a woman's greatest risk was not attraction. It was misjudgment. Choosing a man who appeared strong but collapsed under pressure could mean ruin for her and her offspring. So her instincts developed layers of examination, ways to separate the real from the counterfeit. The tests rarely arrive like exams. They arrive in moments of contradiction. She praises you one day and ignores you the next. She questions your opinions not to humiliate you but to feel whether you stand firm in your ground. She creates small doses of chaos to see if you dissolve into insecurity or remain composed. Men who fail to understand this dynamic perceive these tests as rejection. But in truth, passing them often deepens attraction. Because every test is not about what she says, it is about what you reveal. From a psychological standpoint, these tests align with attachment theory. A woman with an anxious attachment may test more aggressively, needing constant reassurance. A secure woman tests less, but even she will probe occasionally, because her biology does not retire. The irony is that what she truly seeks is not flawless answers, but emotional stability. In other words, she is not watching your words, she is watching your nervous system. Do you flinch? Do you crumble? Do you abandon yourself in order to please her? Or do you remain rooted, calm in the storm she creates? That calmness is read by her subconscious as strength. Carl Jung once remarked that a man who has not passed through his own inferno can never overcome the trials of another. These feminine tests are exactly that inferno. They force a man to confront his own hidden weakness. A man addicted to approval will collapse. A man unsure of his value will argue endlessly, hoping to convince her. But a man who has reconciled with himself will not need to perform. He does not pass the test by trying. He passes by existing in alignment with who he truly is. What makes this paradox fascinating is that most men think women want only kindness, consistency, and unconditional devotion. But unconditional devotion without boundaries feels to her like weakness. It signals that you are more invested in her validation than in your own integrity. That is not the masculine she trusts. What she trusts is a man who can be kind without being a servant, devoted without losing self-respect, loving without surrendering his spine. So these tests, annoying as they may seem, are not barriers. They are invitations. Invitations to evolve beyond insecurity, to prove not to her but to yourself that you can remain unshaken. For in the end, she is not only asking, "Are you strong enough for me?" She is asking, "Are you strong enough for life?" If you step back and see the patterns we've uncovered, a deeper truth begins to shine through. Attraction, desire, the games of testing and uncertainty, they are not surface-level quirks of modern dating. They are ancient codes written into our biology, refined through psychology, and acted out in every human relationship today. Women do not consciously choose to run these patterns, just as men do not consciously choose to be drawn to youth, fertility, or beauty. These are instincts far older than logic, older than culture, older even than language itself. But here lies the paradox that defines human love. Biology may ignite the spark, yet psychology determines whether it survives. If a man reduces love only to instinct, he becomes a slave to it, forever chasing novelty, forever collapsing under tests. If a woman reduces love only to security, she may smother attraction in predictability until it withers away. The union of the two requires more than instinct. It requires awareness. This awareness transforms the entire game. A man who understands that uncertainty is not rejection but reinforcement will stop panicking when a woman pulls back. He will see that the silence is a mirror, reflecting his ability to remain grounded. A man who understands the logic of testing will no longer resent it, but accept it as part of the dance. And a man who understands the currency of his own value, whether in wealth, in status, in charisma, or in simple presence, will stop begging for approval and instead become a source of stability. Yet there is another layer. The greatest test a woman unconsciously gives is not about him. It is about whether he can master himself. In every moment of tension, she asks not with words but with her energy. Are you in control of your world, or does the world control you? If a man cannot govern his own emotions, his own fears, his own impulses, then no promise of love can convince her. Because deep down, attraction is less about who you are and more about who you can remain under pressure. This is why the psychology of love is not a subject of entertainment. It is a subject of transformation. When you understand these laws, you stop moving like a desperate participant in a game you do not understand. You begin to play with clarity, not manipulation. You stop asking, "How do I keep her?" and begin asking, "How do I grow into someone who doesn't need to keep anyone?" For the paradox of desire is this: when you stop needing to hold it, it naturally holds on to you. And so, the call is simple. Do not use these truths as tricks, but as tools for self-mastery. Reflect on the shadow parts of yourself that still beg for validation and refine them into strength. Study the instincts of human behavior not to control others, but to rise above your own chaos. For the more you master your mind, the less you will ever fear losing.